During his first term, Donald Trump's relationships with several cabinet members soured. This time around, he has tapped loyalists across the board, some with controversial records. Let's bring in our political panel, former Republican Congressman from Michigan, Fred Upton, and former Democratic Congressman from New York, Mondaire Jones. Great to see you both.
You bet.
Good to
Well,
see
Fred,
you.
I want to start with you. Republicans have 53 Senate seats. That doesn't guarantee that any of these potential nominees will be confirmed. Do you have any of Trump's selections having an uphill climb as you're tracking?
Well, for sure. Let's face it, the honeymoon is over. However long it was going to be with Gates, and what forced Gates out was the potential to have the ethics report released to show how bad he really was. That still may happen this week, by the way, with a privilege resolution in the House. But for sure, the Secretary of Defense, RFK at HHS, and maybe Patel have the most serious challenges ahead of them. I think it was good news today, at least for the confirmation process, that the FBI background checks are going to start. I think that was going to be demanded anyway, but there would have been a delay had those not started and be completed. But those are the three spots on the frying pan for sure, in terms of where the Democrats are really going to focus their attention.
Well, Fred, in the beginning, Trump aides made very clear that if you're a Republican senator and you're going to vote against any of Trump's picks, you're going to face a primary. But, you know, that faded pretty quickly. We saw Matt Gaetz drop, and now we see at least 4 Republicans who say they could withhold support for Hegseth. So what do you think that says about Trump's threats for these Republican senators?
Well, that's because they didn't know about the allegations in their background. They just saw Hegseth as a Fox TV commentator, a veteran who served admirably. They didn't know about these sexual altercations. They also didn't know that perhaps that he had come out saying that women shouldn't serve in combat. Well, heck, we've had some members of Congress, women that served in combat, some who lost limbs, like the senator from Illinois. So all of a sudden, those are becoming very controversial picks. And if they find anything else in those FBI background checks, they're done. So it's the honeymoon's over. And, you know, if you look at the senators that these cabinet nominees are meeting with, those are the easy votes. They're not meeting with Susan Collins. They're not meeting with Lisa Murkowski. They're meeting with the hardcore MAGA supporters who are going to be with Trump through thick and thin. So there's somebody's going to go. It was more than just Gates. But again, Gates was a stain on the whole process, and the American public wants to know what the full story is.
Mondaire, we just talked in the previous segment about younger Democratic House members challenging senior members for top committee posts. Do you think that it's time for the torch to be passed to a younger generation? Now, to be clear, these candidates are not saying, you know, vote for someone younger, but they're saying it's time for change.
Yeah, and I noticed in Jamie Raskin's letter to the caucus, he did conclude by thanking Congressman, Chairman, or Ranking Member, rather, Jerry Nadler for his 50 years of service in state and in federal politics. So, look, I think the argument is implicit. In some instances, it's explicit without being over the top. I'm a big believer in rewarding talent and putting the best members forward to do battle, in this case, on the House Judiciary Committee with people like Jim Jordan, who are going to be leading the charge, I think, to undermine, from my perspective, America's institutions and the rule of law. I don't think people should be rewarded just because they're younger. But there is, within the Democratic caucus, a lot of concern about some of these ranking members who are up there in age and who are perceived as not being energetic, to put it gently, in the way that you would want a ranking member to be in the 119th Congress, when the stakes are going to be extraordinarily high and Democrats are going to be chomping at the bit to take back the Congress. And so I think you're going to see people like Jamie Raskin actually get a lot of support. And I say that with great respect for the process and for the ranking member, because I served on the House Judiciary Committee, for example.
And Mondaire, I have to ask you about the president's decision to pardon his son Hunter. Several congressional Democrats have condemned that decision publicly. I wonder how you think this could impact the party and the credibility, especially since we heard from Biden so many times that he would definitely not do this.
Yeah, look, I think the president was wrong to say that he was never going to do this. I think everyone understands the compulsion that a father would feel towards his only surviving son. And in this case, you've got a combination of factors. One, Hunter Biden would never have been charged with these crimes were he not the president's son in the first place. And number two, you've got now Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, potentially the next FBI director, on the record on multiple occasions identifying Hunter Biden as someone who they would go after. So I think for a variety of reasons, the president had a good justification to do what he did. Where he erred, I think, is when he said that he wasn't going to do it because he didn't have to make that promise to the American people. And breaking that promise, I think, looks really bad because it is bad to have broken that promise. I think that the American people, having just elected Donald Trump, a convicted felon, who, in addition to his 34 felony convictions in one of those matters, was facing over 50 other charges that ended up being dismissed after the American people voted to return him to the White House, are not going to be focused on this. They're focused on how to make ends meet. They're focused on a variety of other things that are of great importance to them. The use of the pardon power by a president of the United States, in this case, the Democratic president, especially in the context of all of the other more egregious uses of the pardon power by Donald Trump and other presidents throughout the course of history, is not going to rise to the level of concern. And I disagree with Mr. O'Keefe because I did watch the interview earlier. This does not deprive Democrats of the argument that they are standing up for the rule of law in any way, shape, or form. You've got a man who incited a violent insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th, and who, with nomination after nomination, even over the past several days, is showing a great disdain for the rule of law. So the president's lawful use of his pardon power in this case does not in any way, shape, or form undermine Democrats' argument.
Fred, do you agree with that? And I guess paired with that, what is the argument that Democrats should be focused on right now? I mean, you endorsed Vice President Harris, and I wonder what lessons you think the party can take away after the defeat in November.
Well, nobody likes pardons. The American public doesn't like them, and it took them decades to realize that Jerry Ford probably did the right thing with Nixon. But, you know, going back with Obama, with Mark Rich, you look at what Trump did with Kwame Kilpatrick, former mayor of Detroit, or Rod Blagojevich, former governor of Illinois. And nobody likes these things. When you look at polling, I mean, this is way down the list. I mean, inflation, the border security is much more. But I just want to quickly comment on the committee selection. This really is an inside baseball process. That's for sure. But the interesting thing to note is that Republicans did it 30 years ago. So I was chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee for 6 years, 3 terms, back in 2010 to 2016. If I was still in the Congress today, I would not be chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee because of the seniority system would still be in place. It would be somebody else. I'd still be waiting my turn. So I think, there's more non-chairmen than chairs. And I think the votes are going to be there for Jamie Raskin and others that, frankly, have done pretty well on the media circuit and the background that they have, whether it be the select committee on the impeachment process, all of that. I think the seniority system on the Democratic side is going to go like the Republican did 30 years ago.
All right, Fred Upton and Mondaire Jones, thank you both so much for joining us today.